Welcome to Views on the News. Clergy
So was the Pope appealing for peace or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? And a particular welcome to my regular co-host, Tersia. How the devil are you?
I'm still fine, thank you, John. I'm still doing well since last
Good
night.
Nice to see you in your studio.
That I've got on temporary loan from my son.
Never mind, he'll be gone soon. They fly from the nest eventually. Yes. And welcome to Guy from Manchester.
Hi.
Hello, Guy. Thank you for coming. So, diving straight into the items of the news, if I can get that window open, the first item is about an event that happened some time ago when two boys were killed by Israeli soldiers on the West Bank. And the reason it's in the recent news is because the BBC has made a program about it, and they've pieced together, based on mobile phone and CCTV footage, what actually went on. And it's not good for the Israeli, what do they call themselves, a defense force, because it looks very much as though the soldiers shot off without justification, to such an extent that the evidence has prompted Ben Saul, who is a UN Special Rapporteur on human rights and counterterrorism, to say that the death of one of the boys, at least he was shot in the back of the head, appears to be a war crime. So now, of course, the IDF said the circumstances were under review and claimed that live fire is used only in order to remove immediate threats or for arrest purposes following arrest protocols after exhausting other options. I do have a video of this. It's on the news. I'm not going to show it now because it's not very pleasant. But there you go. The BBC have used their technology, their expertise, and they have identified the nature of this event. And it appears to have been a war crime. What do you think of that?
Oh dear.
Yeah,
These things go on.
That's about all there is to say.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, this has been going on a long time. The IDF soldiers on the ground do not appear to be bound by the standards and protocols that the generals and the politicians say apply.
Yeah.
You see this time and again.
Well, I'm sorry, but if you give young men guns, they're going to pull the trigger without thinking too much.
Yeah. And I mean, a boy shot in the back of the head is clearly not posing a threat.
Yes.
Well, not clearly, but presumably.
He was running away. They'd already shot his friend.
Yeah. Very sad, but this is just one of many, many instances, not just in the West Bank, but also in Gaza.
Yeah.
And it's the sort of incident that is is generating a huge amount of passion in the West and in the universities and amongst especially the left, who feel that this is a major moral issue.
Yes, we're coming on to that in later items. Yes, indeed. Tersia, you were starting to say something?
Yeah, the two thoughts that come to mind is an interview that I saw with Yuval Noah Harari, just a few days after the 7 October attacks. And he expressed the hope that the Israeli government would be greater than the events that unfolded on the 7th of October. And it seems that they weren't able to be greater than the horrific events of the 7th of October. And that has resulted, and I think it will continue to result, in tit for tat and these types of horrific events until somebody somewhere decides now it is time to be greater than the horrific events playing out around us. And those of our viewers who are interested in history, I want to plug the Dan Snow's History Hit. Very recently, they unearthed the copies of the diary of an SS Panzer unit.
Yes.
And they made 3 brilliant documentaries with film footage that matched it. So some of the footage was photographs were taken actually by the person whose diary they discovered. But the one thing that showed me, and I know it's almost 80 years ago, but humans are still humans.
Yes.
When there's war, it brings out the best and the worst in humanity. And so far, in this conflict, I think we've seen more of the worst than of the best.
And it's just trigger happiness too. It seems trivial to the holder of the gun, but I'm afraid it isn't. And yes, I endorse your endorsement of Dan Snow's History Hit. They're very good. So, unfortunately, that's not the only place where horrendous events have been happening, because you may remember in 2022, there was an uprising in Iran, and lots of young women were burning their hijabs and so on, one of which made sort of international news by being videoed on top of a dumpster, setting fire to her hijab. A young lady, 16, called Nika Shakarami. And this was in response to the protests over the death of Mahsa Amini. But what's come up recently is another BBC report. They've investigated the events following Nika Shakarami's protest, and they have discovered that she was captured by the police. There was, I think the last thing we heard from her was a tweet or a text from her phone to her friends saying she was being pursued by the police, but apparently they caught her. She was in a van. They sexually assaulted and killed her. And UN investigators have said that Iran is responsible for the physical violence that went on at that time.
Well, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, unsurprisingly, this has been followed by Iran prosecutors filing criminal charges against the BBC report, against the journalists. That's why it's in the news now.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that there seems to be an all-out war, a very aggressive war by the police and the Iranian authorities against the protesters. It's unusual to see quite such a vicious campaign against protesters, especially non-violent protesters.
Yes.
And the Iranian authorities seem to be distinguishing themselves by the viciousness, violence, and aggression.
Yes.
When they're on the wrong side of history.
Yes,
and
indeed.
On the side of human rights and pretty much the only side that they think they're on is on the side of a non-existent God and a religion whose actual credentials are very much questionable anyway.
Absolutely. Yes. Do you think the BBC should be worried that they're under threat of being prosecuted by Iran? The journalists
Is it a journalist or is it the corporation? Because I mean, the corporation is not based in Iran and is not really accessible, but
it's the
individual journalists, they can be, and they are liable to be persecuted. And this is an example.
Yeah. Yes,
but
indeed.
Telling the truth.
I'd be more worried about other acts of retaliation. One can't help but think so sort of fanatics deciding to take justice into their own hands. That would worry me more than any actual form of prosecution. I mean, a form of prosecution, one can actually muster some defense against that, but some rogue fanatics, that would really concern me if I were those journalists. I do hope the British government protects them and assists them in any way that as British citizens.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, this is the only way we're finding out about what's going on. It's these brave citizen reporters, basically.
Well, that and professional reporters. About 100 and some odd of the professional journalists have been killed in the last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't surprise me.
It's a dangerous job.
Can I make a correction? Talk about journalists. So please, in a previous show, I referred to Douglas Murray when I was in fact wanting to refer to Charles Murray, who wrote a book about IQ. So let me just make very clear for posterity that I had the wrong person in mind. I wasn't thinking about Douglas Murray. I was thinking about Charles Murray. So,
okay. You're forgiven.
For the record.
Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, in the US of A, Islam is spreading. Take a look at this. This is in UCL, University of California, Los Angeles, I think.
Now what? Sure.
Now, I visited California and went to, I think, Stanford University 20 some odd years ago. And if you told me back then that I would see a scene like that, I wouldn't have believed you.
Well, I mean, they're doing this all over the place, and it's part of their witness. It's a part of their dua to try and show, that they're religious and so forth. I mean, the thing when I see Muslims or anybody taking up that posture, I'm reminded that this is a slave posture. Really, it's an undignified position for any human being. I think to adopt voluntarily.
It's submission, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do they feel the need to do that? What's happened to their self-esteem?
Yes, exactly. But I mean, within that, they have a sort of arrogance almost as well, as any believer tends to have. But I just hope that large numbers of Americans don't get taken in by this.
Yeah.
I think we need to start a serious campaign as rationalists, humanists, and skeptics to really revive the street epistemology movement, because what should be happening there is there should be a street epistemology practitioner sort of every 5 meters to just put these people in a position to just begin to sort of examine their own belief system without any threat. And I think that is what we need, because what I find interesting is these are young people.
It's a university, isn't it?
Yes, they're poorly informed young people. That's the trouble. And the other trouble is, instead of going towards, critical thinking, what the reaction tends to be, let's cuddle up to Christianity in defense of this invasion of Islam.
That it's a really I remember when I was still going to church about 20 odd years ago, one of the last sermons that I attended was actually a missionary speaking about the growth and the spread of Islam. And I have to confess that at the time, I remember the slideshows indicating how Islam would be spreading. And it's about in line with what he, I mean, it was based on statistics. I mean, it wasn't a prophecy or anything. And I wish I knew then about street epistemology, because I would have done many things differently in my own life. If I'd known then what I know now. So,
yes. Well, carrying on with America and the universities in America, there's a lot of pro-Palestinian demonstrations going on. And again, I don't think these are young people who they think in very polar ways. They either want the cowboy with the white hat or the bad guy with the black hat. And it isn't as simple as that. And I personally, I've said this before, I can't support either side in the Middle Eastern dispute at the moment, but Palestine is getting a lot of sympathy. Take a look at this. This is New York, Columbia University, where the protesters they broke into one of the university's halls, as you saw, and occupied it. And the people reporting on this said that they'd entered with bags full of stuff. So they're planning to live there for a long while. I mean, it's right that students should be passionate and should protest against whatever they feel they need to support or reject. But I wish they were better informed, and I wish they didn't feel the need to break things,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it seems both of us are sort of stunned, Guy.
Well, I mean, something that's been occurring to me recently is the word genocide is being very freely wielded here.
Yeah.
And if you look up the definition of genocide, it's the destruction of a people or race.
Yes.
In whole or in part. So that is very unhelpful. It's not that I think that, in part, what does that mean? That means if you kill 100 people from one particular race, that could be genocide.
Yes.
But surely you have to have the intention to kill or to exterminate that race.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't think that the evidence is there that Israel intends to exterminate the Gazan people in whole or in part. But it's not far off. Their intentions are pretty slaughterous. There's no doubt about that. They're killing left, right, and centre without any
absolutely
restraint. And they've killed 35,000 at least now, and so that's getting to be a significant number.
Yes, indeed.
And then the international court, has said, well, there's a case to be made here.
Yes,
they haven't said this is genocide.
No, but this is an overreaction against.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the genocides in the past, you know, the Holocaust was an actual attempt to exterminate the Jewish population of Europe.
Yes.
And then the Armenian genocide was, you know, apparently something similar in Turkey.
Yes.
And then you had the Rwandan genocide, again, something very similar. We're talking about much bigger scales of deliberate killing of one particular body of people.
Yes, indeed.
I'm not sure that this is the correct word here. It's still awful, but I don't think the word genocide is right.
Yeah, yeah. People like to bandy words when they can, even though they don't necessarily mean what they want to say. Yeah. Exaggeration rules. Tersia.
I was going to say, I wonder what these students wish to achieve, because do they want their universities to take a stance? I mean, I'm not sure. This is an international. I'm just a little bit confused what they want to achieve and why they think that. I mean, their government knows exactly what's going on, and it's not as. What I would like them to see students protest against is the trade in weapons. That's what I'd like to see. And I wonder.
I think that's their objective.
Yeah, well, maybe.
That would be that I would approve, but then I would still like to know how many of them are actually studying engineering, and how many of them will end up working for weapons manufacturers.
Yes, indeed.
That's and I'm saying this because I've recently become aware of the weapons trade again. Reading some South African newspapers. Reading about what's happening in Ukraine. Somewhere there's a lot of people making a hell of a lot of money.
That's right.
The modern arms trade is just, I mean,
massive. Yeah, I mean, there is I think the students in the UK are campaigning for disinvestment. That's another big thing, that most universities have quite substantial portfolios of money, usually in pensions and so forth. And they want them disinvested from Israel. Plus, they want to move their own government's policy from being a somewhat impartial or supportive of Israel to being much more critical and to stop the flow of arms.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a big thing, Tersia, I agree. It so happens that I've just had a meeting, a social, with some great Manchester humanist people. And there's a guy there who's 60, who is unemployed, but he's got lots of talent, and he got a job. He was offered a job just before Christmas with BAE Systems, weapons manufacturer, and he decided he wasn't going to take it because, you know, of just things that
he's got principles. That's why.
Conscience, yeah. I'm impressed with him, and he's still unemployed now. You know.
Yes, he's suffering.
And it's difficult to get jobs when you're 60.
Yes, indeed, that's true. Yes. So one of the problems here is it's not the world that I grew up living in. What's happened is somebody invented the jumbo jet, which made it possible for everybody to travel anywhere quite cheaply. And then somebody else invented the internet, which means we know what's going on all over the place. So every issue is now global. So we see these conflicts in London, New York, Texas. I've got one coming up in Texas, Michigan. They're all over the place. And it's not our fight. But thanks to globalism, it is.
Yes, but on the other hand, John, both you and I are universalists in our thinking, aren't we?
Yes, indeed.
So in that sense, we look to establish more uniform standards of behavior and peace and human rights across the world.
Yes.
And so in that sense, I'm kind of pleased that people do think about these things. I'm just worried about the actual issue, whether there is, you know, whether it's as clear cut as they seem to think. I'm certainly very critical of Israel for what they have done for 75 years in Gaza and Palestine. But
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So I wonder how long is it going to take before this globalism settles down into a humanitarian culture?
Things seem to be going in the wrong direction at the moment in Europe, anyway.
Yeah, it's worrying, isn't it? So going back to the US of A, pro-Palestine rallies in Dearborn, Michigan, and Houston, Texas, they epitomize what we've just been complaining about, because they chanted "Death to America." Watch this.
The pro-Palestine rallies held in Dearborn, Michigan and Houston, Texas, which included chants of death to America and death to Israel, have stirred significant public outrage and media attention. These rallies, marking the International Day of Al-Quds, underscored the deep divisions regarding U.S. support for Israel following the deadly October 7th attack that claimed the lives of 1,200 Israelis.
There you go. You see, it's people are choosing sides.
Well, death to America is, of course, what they say in Iran, isn't it? In the crowds there say "Death to America."
Exactly. Yes, but they're hearing it in their own cities now.
Yeah, and we've had not dissimilar sort of demonstrations in the UK as well.
We have, and that's another item later on tonight as well. Yes.
I just think we have such short memories, and I don't think enough people study history. I was listening once again to History Hit podcast, and I don't know how many people realize that in the 70s, Iran and Israel were allies.
Yes.
I mean, it's within my life. And we need to just get people to do two things. We need people to examine their beliefs, and we need people to study history, because if you study history, then you will realize that not too long ago, countries that are now enemies were allies, and things change really, really fast. And that creates perspective, and that makes it that helps one to realize it's easy to have a march and bash in windows and occupy buildings, but it's not so easy to get solutions to real complicated problems.
Absolutely. And of course, you're talking about back then when Iran was only recently Persia, and it was very westernized. So what has happened? Islam has happened.
Yes, I mean, but you have to remember that the Shah, who was in charge in those days, was somewhat of a dictator in his own right.
Yeah. He was by no means perfect, but
America loved him, of course. I mean, let's not forget that.
And we certainly had a lot of refugees in Manchester from Iran from that period.
Yes.
And when I was a young solicitor in the early 80s, there were pitched battles between the Shah supporters and the communists and the Islamists in Manchester. So it was crazy. You know, I'm talking about Iranian ones. And I remember representing a number at some major riots or something, you know.
Yeah, this is not new, I'm afraid. Neither is this that I'm going to show you, which is about a Jewish student of UCLA who was being denied entry to his own university because he is Jewish. Watch this.
You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making the burr while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Why can't they go? Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them.
Brave boy.
It's similar to a case in the UK of this David Falter, who was stopped by the police from crossing the road in
Yeah.
a Palestinian demonstration on the grounds that he was openly Jewish.
Yes.
And because he obviously he was wearing a kippah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And I think the police were worried about his safety in the middle of a pro-Palestinian march.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a very difficult business, this.
Well, we've got an item from the police later.
How did that interaction end?
Well, it was filmed. I mean, this David Falter, he is in fact a Jewish activist, and he had it all filmed, and he made a big song and dance about it. And you know, next minute, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, was having to apologize or something, and then he, on second thoughts, he said, "No, my officers did the right thing."
Yes, we're coming to him in a minute.
All right.
Yeah. So, and even as far away as Melbourne, Australia, the Islamists, the activists, the fundamental members of the Islamic religion are being quite assertive. Watch this.
I'm gonna fucking get you. You're gonna what? I'm gonna fucking get you. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do?
So that was a Jewish filmmaker in Melbourne who was being accosted by the guy actually doing the leave is on parole, or he's actually being prosecuted, but he's out on bail. I think that's the expression.
He'll hopefully lose his bail now.
Well, I hope so.
The thing is that this, all the events in Gaza have made you know, young Muslims very excited and very, you know, energized all over the world, and they're feeling very angry, and this is the result.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah.
I don't blame them for being angry.
Well, do you, Guy and John, do you think there's any merit in the maybe it's a probably conspiracy theory at this stage, that all this is or much of this is the doing of Vladimir Putin to draw attention away from what's happening in Ukraine?
I'm not a great conspiracy theorist myself.
I'm not aware of any evidence. You know, I think let's wait for the evidence. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. So, still in Australia, you may remember, if you were with me last week, that there was a bishop in a church who was stabbed 6 times, and they got the young boy who was the stabber, and this is his mother.
Now, the parents of the boy who sparked the investigation are speaking publicly for the first time. Police say your son carried out a terrorist attack. Is he a terrorist?
No. My son is not a terrorist. He just turned 16. How would be a terrorist?
Poor mother.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that the mother doesn't really know much about her son. You know, plenty of 16-year-olds have proved themselves to be terrorists or to be supportive of terrorism. I mean, look at that young girl that is still languishing in a camp in Syria.
Yes,
who's had a Shamima Begum, I think her name is.
Yes,
had
that's
her citizen stripped. She was only about 15 or 16 when she went to Turkey or Syria. So, I mean, these things can happen at that sort of. In fact, grooming takes place from even earlier than that.
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable age, and it's also a very angry age. So you can poke them a bit and get them to do stuff that they possibly regret.
Yeah.
But it's the mother who doesn't understand what her son is capable of. That's a shame. Anyway,
I always love the Allahu Akbar slogan, because it apparently it means God is greater. God is greater than what? You know, than who? it implies actually other gods are around, and this one is the greater one.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Tersia's connection is broken, I'm afraid. But we've only got one more item that I want to show you tonight.
Right.
And that is about the response of the Metropolitan Police Chief, because he's been under pressure, as you know, for not being consistent and not using enough of the laws that he's been empowered to use. So this is his response to those accusations.
We have seen on protests that are pro-Ukrainian comparing people comparing Putin's regime to the Nazis. Now, we're probably not going to arrest people for that,
right?
Because it's a different context. So that's the point. But on the context that you're thinking about in terms of people protesting about what's going on in the Middle East, any sort of Nazi comparison is going to be illegal. We're going to make arrests.
Yeah. So there you go. He's caught on the horns of a dilemma. He's saying that in some circumstances you can accuse people of being a Nazi, and in other circumstances you can't.
Yeah, it's very difficult for the police's job. But I mean, when they've got the chance, Palestinian will be free from the river to the sea, uttered by some pro-Palestinian supporters who are linked to Hamas, then it appears to be promoting genocide. Appears to be, and that is a worry. That's a context. But the same words by pro-Palestinian, but not Hamas, people just say, no, we want Palestinians to live freely in their own land, perhaps alongside Israelis.
Yeah.
So, and yeah.
Or the same words. Or the same words uttered against Putin by Ukrainians, because Putin does seem to be behaving like a Nazi. That's acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, Putin is a dictator in the old style, the old Russian style.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is similar. That is a sort of fascist, totalitarian kind of style of operation.
How difficult it is to be a policeman.
Yeah, it is tough. I remember years ago I met a policeman who told me he was a communist. I thought, this is unusual.
Yeah. Most policemen or any military are very much nationalists.
They tend to be on the right, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thin blue line.
The thin blue line, that's the one.
Yeah, actually,
you ever see that program? There was a series called The Thin Blue Line.
There was with Rowan Atkinson. It was very funny.
I owned the box set. I'm an aficionado.
Wow, I'm jealous. I want that box set. I don't think it's ever been reshown.
No, I don't know why. I mean, it was brilliant, and there were only about.
I think it's too honest, because
it might. Yeah.
And it's even more relevant today than it was.
Well, that might be the problem. That might be the problem. The BBC thinks they daren't put it out because they look biased. Yeah.
I think we ought to have a campaign to have it brought back.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I'll smuggle it in. If you sponsor my ticket to the event in London, I'll smuggle it in.
You won't need to smuggle it in. It's not illegal in this country.
No.
Yeah.
Make copies.
Let's begin an alternate campaign. Revive the thin blue line, and we all.
Yes, bring it back. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, we haven't set the world to rights at all, as usual, but we have sounded off on our opinions, and that's the point of Views on the News.
John, I didn't read the items before I came on the show, and unless I missed something while I was my internet left me, you didn't mention anything about the Saudi Arabian young woman who was sentenced to 9 years in prison for she was accused of terrorism because she makes so it's one of three sisters, One, I think one is still in prison, and this young lady was sentenced to 9 years in Saudi Arabia.
Well, for a bit of reporting. She was another journalist, wasn't she? I think. Or was she an activist? She didn't do anything violent or even threatening.
Yeah, she just posted videos. That's it. She was protesting against the male chaperone system that they have in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And she just made TikTok or Instagram posts about that. I'm not sure, she might be a journalist, but she's also a fitness instructor, and she just said it's not right that women should be subjected to what is the patronize the system that they have in Saudi Arabia, that a woman and so I'll send you the link because
yes, please. I'm not all powerful, and that item never came across my came to mind.
I think I read it in the Guardian maybe this morning.
Yeah.
That's right. I read it in the Guardian.
Well, if it was this morning, then it'll come up in the next Global Atheist News.
I read it earlier this week, so maybe Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. Send me the link and I'll put it in. I'll put it in next week's Global Atheist News.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought that was quite Saudi Arabia. I mean, they allow women to drive, but just don't.
Yeah, they're trying. They're trying, aren't they? They're trying to become modern.
They just don't allow any dissent, even if it's something they're in the process of doing anyway. And those women who did protest against the rule disallowing them from driving, some of them are still in prison, even though women are now allowed to drive.
Yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, there you go. On that note.
All right.
Oh, so uplifting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Let me give my room back to my 21-year-old son, who is way more powerful than I am in any case.
and probably a foot taller. Yes.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Say goodbye.
Bye-bye, Guy. Bye, John.
Yes.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carrying drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that?